Hello everybody, welcome to my session, Building Abstract Data Layers for SQL Server. This is a pure dev session. I hope you all enjoyed the party yesterday. Did someone win? Did someone win yesterday at the, what was it called? It was blackjack and so on? Somebody won something? No? Me too, but I didn't win anything. The first and most important thing is no technical issues. 2 years ago, I was in Stockholm and I had a few technical problems with my laptop. Now everything is fine, well prepared. Well, dev session. What we are doing is, what I want to do is, I want to explain how you can protect your data by building or by using schemes, using different objects, and that you don't get direct access to your data. That's the part what we are talking about. Stop one. Okay, it's done. So that's me. My name is Uwe Ricken. I'm a so-called Uhu under 100. That's something what my wife told me because I'm 51 years old. I'm a Microsoft certified master. It's a retired program from Microsoft, and I'm an MVP. That's all about me. I think the rest is okay. Only one important thing is I really, really like, if you would like to contact me, have any questions concerning this topic or any other thing, feel free to contact me. I really try to answer every question I get by email. Let me have at least 2 days to answer your questions. Okay, let's start. This is the agenda. What we first of all have to do, we're talking about a multi-tier model. That means what is the common definition of it. There is a little misunderstanding and many misunderstandings in that. And after that, we're talking about the multi-tier model. That means the development with SQL Server, because we only have one part what we have a look to. Not the whole framework itself, but only the part of the SQL Server, what you can do. What is it? We're talking about integrity of data. This is, from my point of view, one of the most important things. And the second is the protection of data. That means that you try to avoid direct access to the data. And last but not least, the manipulation of data. And the fourth point, which is important for me too, because I learned it from the scratch, so that you can reuse the objects what you have created in your SQL Server database. Multi-tier model seems very complicated, but it isn't. It means nothing else but the segregation of the application and its business logic into multiple logical units. That mean that you spread these units. For example, we have, in our case, 2 separate layers. We have the 3 separate layers, excuse me. The data layer, which is the resource layer, which means these contains only your data, nothing else. Yeah, only the tables. The business logic means the domain logic. This is the second layer, and this is the processing of the data and its calculation of its information. This is the first time where you abstract the data. That means that the access to the tables will be transformed into, for example, in a common view where the people can see the data in a more friendly way, for example. And the third one, but this is not a part of this session, is the GUI, the graphical user interface, which accesses these data. And the most important thing, and this need to be keep in mind, is a multi-tier application is not branded by its distribution on multiple servers, but by the segregation of each component. And that's what I'm trying to show you. I think, so I have to be honest, that's the way I was working with SQL Server. The first time ever I got in contact with that, I had my application, had my tables, because I'm coming from the Access environment, Microsoft Access. Who knows Microsoft Access? Oh, not so much. Oh, very much, yeah. So what did I do? I think the most of you did the same. You have created your tables, and then, quite easy, Microsoft makes it easy. Click, 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 click. They connect to your server, and then you have access to your tables. It's the same as you did it with Microsoft Access when there was an Access backend behind. The problem is, and that is, to be honest, that was my problem, due to the fact that I had direct access to my data, I wasn't aware of any security issues. Why should I? Yeah? So, and this is the way how basically I started with the development, and what I see very, very often in my consulting services. I see many applications accessing one database in the same way. In this case, I have 3 applications running directly on the data, that means on the table level. And now think about the following complication. One developer means, okay, I need to have a change in one of the tables. It has to rename an attribute, for example, or had to extend the table, the text, for example. What will happen with the others? They will definitely run into trouble, or they could run into trouble. Let's say someone is performing a big problem with indexing because the query is running slow. What will happen? They implement an index, but that maybe affect another application. So what we want to do is the following. I want to have a barrier in between the applications and in between the data. And what I'm doing is what we are looking for is only this part, the yellow part. The blue part is for the professional developers who are working with .NET, with Java, whatever else. I don't have any idea what they are doing. And with respect, I'm out of development since 8 years. And the only thing I know from .NET is how it's written. That's it. Yeah? So we are taking care of this part here of the multi-tier model. And so this is the way how it will look when we have our developments ready. The blue part is, again, the application itself, the GUI and the libraries, what's using that. And the part under this barrier, this is ours. And this is the technology or the implementation, how we will do that. We have our data, and you can see that the application, either the application or the business layer, don't have access to the data. It's protected. The idea behind it is that the access will only be coming by store procedures, by views, and by functions, which can interact each other. So that means a store procedure, for example, can handle a view. Or a function could be, I think that many will say, oh gosh, could be a part in a function or in a store procedure. And that's what we're doing. Why should we use these multi-tier models in development? Well, the first thing is that the integrity of data should be the highest priority. That's from my point of view. The data is your money. And if you grant access to your data and you don't know what will change in your data, then you may be lost. So that means that we want to have a controlled access to the data, which is a requirement of the business. And the second thing, the integrity of the data, and this is a very common issue, should not be controlled by the application. I have seen applications where the GUI inside had the complete business logic inside. So that means they only access the data, but all the rules behind what the application should do or how the business is working was in the framework of the application. And now think about what will happen if they change the business rules. They have to deploy the application, if it's a fat client, to every computer new. It would be, from my point of view, a better approach to have it on the database side, for example, to deploy one store procedure with a new business rule, and really every application is taking part of that. And that's what the idea is behind. The second thing that will be the demo in the last part is the reusability of the data by multiple applications. Therefore, I have created an Access database, the only thing I can really develop. And the second one is the reporting services. That means we use the same resources for the big client, for the fat client, and for the reporting services. When should we use the multiple tier model? Well, the application has to support requirements of multiple customers or business units. That was my first time I was thinking about trying to get the business logic into the SQL database. That was a real-world story. I had a customer where I have developed a membership management system, and it was, let's say, successful that 5 other countries have bought that. The problem was they had completely other membership requirements, and that was our fault. That means they were currently running then 5 different membership tools, all the same background, same data, but different business rules. So the version 2, we had completely moved the business logic out and put it into the database. The second one, and this is a very important thing in large companies and enterprises, is segregation of tasks within the development process. And depending on it, the application development in a team. To be honest, I think that I'm a good SQL developer, but I'm not a GUI developer. I can't do that. I don't know the .NET Framework or Hibernate or anything else. So what I can do is I can support the normal development team with the technology of SQL Server. So if they ask me how, or provide me with a view or with a store procedure, I can take care where are the tables which I should provide to the client, what indexes should I use to analyze the execution plans and. Yeah? And that's the reason why I said experts for database development, for example, yeah, SQL Server, or I use the bad words, excuse me, and the expert for .NET, Visual Basic, BI, and so on. Multi-tier elements can be implemented in Microsoft SQL Server by using schemes, and that's the part what we're doing. A schema, who is not familiar with that, I have a short demonstration of it. Schemas are very simple. These are areas within a database where you can drop objects in and you can control access to it. This is new since SQL Server 2005, and before it was we only had one schema. One question, and to be honest, to every SQL developer, who is developing in the DBO scheme? Yeah. Who is using different schemas? Wow. Okay. Then it was, thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, a schema is a container for object. The ownership and the securable elements can be transferred. This is new, and objects can be moved in between the schemas. Multiple database users can use a single database scheme. Security administration for schemas and its objects is very granular, and every schema, except of this schema, can be the property of any database principal. That's the common use, how it is. We have one container where we drop our tables, views, and so on. We have an owner, this is the principal, who is the owner of the schema, and then we can grant access to that schema to groups, to roles, for example, and for dedicated database users. And this is something I want to demonstrate quite fast. The first thing what I'm doing is I create a new database called DemoDB, recovery model set to simple, that's it. Everything brand new. Okay. So here it is. What I'm doing is the following. I create a new user without a login. It's quite more simple than with login. I create one user called customer user and another one called management. The next thing is that I create a new schema called demo, and with authorization DBO, that means that the DB owner is the user DBO is the owner of that schema. He can control it. And what I'm now doing is, and this is, as I said, new since SQL 2005, I grant a permission on that schema. I say, please allow the user called management the select permission on the schema named demo. So, and now I'm creating a table and put in 10 records. Go. So, and now try to get to the data. Please remember that the schema DMO is only accessible by the management. If I try to handle it as a customer user, it would fail because the select permission, was denied. The first protection I have. So due to the fact that I have only granted the management account the right to access it, it would work. I think it's quite simple. But how did this work? And this is a very important thing, that you understand how the ownership of the objects take part in SQL Server. I make a selection on the schemas system view and this is objects. And what you can see here, this is the first thing. Let me make it a little bit larger. Okay. Here you see this is the demo schema ID 5, and the principal ID, which is behind it, means that is the owner of that schema. So what you can see in the foo is it has no principal ID. Funny, isn't it? Every object in SQL Server needs an owner. But why isn't it that way? It's very, very simple, because the owner of this schema has created this object, and so automatically, if there is no principal ID, the owner will automatically be inherited from the schema owner. Now, I'm altering the authorization. That means I make the customer user the owner of the table. And I try again to do that. It's working. That means also the database user doesn't have the right on the schema, it has the permissions on the table. And because that's true, it's the owner now of the table. And I tried again with the foo, and it's working in the same way, but this time not from the table, but from the schema. And if you look to the internal structures, you now can see perfectly that the principal ID has been named, the number 5, and this is, you can trust me, this is the custom user. I think it's quite simple. And everything clean. Come on and drop the user. Any questions so far? Good. Good. So, for the demo I want to show, these are my strategies. That's what we implement. I have a segregation of GUI and business data and business and data. I have the separation of, not from system objects, application objects, my customer object, very important thing. And I want to avoid the direct access to the data layer. Data manipulation is only allowed by using store procedure, and this is my application environment I want to use, I want to implement. I will have 2 logins, that's what I create now, called customer user and management user, and they both are users of the database. Furthermore, I will have in my DemoDB dedicated roles. These roles will be essential for me for controlling the type of access I want to grant to the users. And then I have my schemas called application, business, and data control. That's what I want to do. Come on. Okay. The first thing what I'm doing is, I'm creating my schemas. The schemas I want to use as a container for my objects, and I have 5 different schemas. The data, which contains all my data, all the tables, every single table from the customer will be in that schema. The control schema has only one function. If you're working with .NET or with Windows forms, you can put controls on a form, and if you have a data layer behind, let's say a combo box or a list box, and these access layers should be in the controls schema. The reporting, that is for my report server, my application, and my business. The application, that is the access, the users get access only for execution, and the business layer is for my helper views, what I want to implement. Okay, and here are my logins. Long story short, I create a login called customer user. I create a login called management, and you see they are all SQL accounts. And I create then in my DemoDB the users called customer user and the management user. And then here they are created. Then I grant privileges to the former created schema. So I grant execute permissions on the application schema to the customer user and to the management. An easier way would be to do it for the public group, but it's not recommended to do that. It's not so granular. Then I grant execute on the business for the customer user and execute and select to the management. And so on and so on. So you see that I can granularly grant permissions to the different schemas. And here is the more interesting thing, because that's the part where I want to control the access to my data. I create 3 roles. These 3 roles will have a very simple idea behind. I will categorize my customers depending on their revenue. Let's say a customer who has more than 5,000 euros a year, that would be an A customer, very important customer, and so on and so on. What I'm doing is I'm creating database roles. I'm using them later on with a function in a view to separate the data which a user is allowed to see. That makes me possible to implement security within my SQL Server, but not in the application. So I create these roles. I add members. What you can see from the members is the user management will later on have access to every customer who is an A customer, a B, and a C customer, while the customer user is only allowed to see the C customers. So let's run it. Oh, this is clear, yeah, I have to mark it. Done. This is only the control. I don't think that we have to go in detail. Here are my both logins. These are my database users, and these are my roles I have created. I think it's very simple till yet. Good. Now we start. The first thing what you need to do is that you protect your data, that you have that you will make sure that your data are completely the integrity is perfect. And what you can do there is you're using constraint. This is the first step to make sure that your data are that the integrity of your data are perfect. So you see here multiple constraints. The first thing I think everybody using is not null. That makes sure that you will have always values in it. The second one, what you can use is a so-called default constraint. This is a very easy constraint which say if you don't enter a value to it, then the SQL Server will do it for you. That makes sure that at least the default value is available inside the database. The other one is default 2. For the insert user, there is a special thing what you need to take in consideration. Since SQL Server 2008, it's allowed to impersonate somebody. Or maybe you have read about that you can use execute as for stored procedures, for example. And if you use, for example, the original name, the current user variable, or the suser s name, what else, then it will always take the new identity. To avoid that, always use original login. If you only use a default, you can run into problems because a default doesn't prevent that someone is overriding the data. Therefore, I need a check constraint. This is another constraint to make sure that the data have a full integrity. I say that the insert user is only allowed the original login. That means the user who is currently working on that, this name is always allowed. And the insert date is the get date. The primary key and the other constraint, the unique key, I think it's clear. And I do the same with an invoice table, but here you can see I have only one constraint, that the not null. And what you can do is that you can alter your table. I want to show you 2 strategies. The first is inside the table. The second one is that you create the constraints afterwards by alter table and add constraint. That is funny if someone is calling me inside the session. Excuse me. So I create the default, the constraints, and let's go. Done. Any questions so far? Cool. Oh, sorry, that was the wrong one. Yeah. The second thing what you can use, I know many people saying, oh, triggers, don't use them, but it's a good choice. In some situations, it's, from my point of view, better. Come on, Control Shift R. So, it's better. Sometimes it's better to use a trigger for complicated business rules. So, for example, in my situation, I say, If there is, for example, some record I wanted to insert where the customer code, the country code, excuse me, is Denmark, but the customer zip, the length of the zip is less than 4 or greater than 4, then it will be rejected and say, okay, no, it's not allowed. The only problem you have with triggers is that the transaction will take longer. So if you're dealing with very much data you want to enter, then be very careful if you want to use triggers. Don't want to take care of it. Okay, good. Now we start with our implementation. So that is our environment, and we start with the layer 1. The layer 1 is the data layer in our case. So that means only our tables, segregation of data in dedicated schemas. In our case, due to the fact that it's only a demo, I only put my data from the customer and then from the invoices in my data schema. What I like to do is I very often work with a schema called system data. There is all my controlling tables in application data and so on. Integrity will be provided by constraints, triggers, and DRE, direct declarative referential integrity. And the most important thing is that we don't have any direct access for any user. And this is my table. Okay. Here I create them, the customers and the invoices, and so that's what I did, and I fill it completely with data. That's quite fast. So now I have a few customer data and I have a few invoicing data. That's what we can work for. And the access to that data isn't possible for any user because nobody has access to the data schema. Good. The second thing now is that I will implement the second layer, the business layer, which means there are helper functions, for example, like views or stored procedure. This will give us the chance to get dedicated access to the, just refresh the, okay. That will give us a chance to control the data flow. In this case, I will do it in the following way. I have my DemoDB. I create a new simple view, but you see it's in a different schema. It's not in the DBO schema. And what I'm doing is, this view, very simple, it only makes a view on the data where we have where we could classify the data, make it, excuse me, an A and B or an C customer. And that's a very simple thing. I take the revenue of the invoices and divide it by the number of invoices, and then I check whether it is smaller, equal to 1,000, and so on. So, come on, done. First, before I want to look in it, here you see now that each customer has its own customer category. The funny thing here is it's exactly the same name as the database roles I have. So maybe you think you know what will come then. Yeah? So in the moment somebody is in a special role, then maybe I could query that. If I try to access the data at the customer user, it definitely may fail. Because on that level, on that schema, the user is not allowed to have any permission. But if I do it as the management, they are the owner of the company, then they are allowed to see everything. But the problem here is that that the customer user need to have access to it. The only idea, or the only thing what you have to think of is how will the customer user later on access these objects. Basically, he will do it over an application. And this is the only reason why I put my store procedure into the application schema. And maybe you remember, every user was allowed to execute the store procedures which are in the application schema. And what do you think? Why is it so that the user, customer user, is allowed over the application through the business schema to access the data? It's because of the owner change. You know, remember, the owners for every object I have created currently, the owner was always the DBO, so there is no change in between. The chain of the owner chain has not broken. So I create this application proc customer revenue. It's a very simple thing. I take my helper view I have created formally, and I ask them. Okay, now I try to execute as the customer user, and now it will work. But the problem is solved. The user don't have access to the data itself. He can't do anything with that. That's a great job. So in the moment the customer user want to access the data with whatever application, it could be an Excel or it could be the FAT client, no problem. It has to use always the application proc customer revenue. But the problem with that is that we currently have a data leak in that store procedure. The customer user, I will show you the configuration of him as we have implemented it. I go to my database, DemoDB, I go to the security, I go to my user, and I go to the customer user. This is okay. I look to the membership, and here you see that the user is, due to the fact that he's only in the role C customer, basically only allowed to get access to the C customers. If the user executed it directly, he get everything. Yeah? So we get 55 records. So there's a problem. There is a leak in our store procedure, but it's very simple to avoid. The only thing what I'm doing, and for everybody who is performing index tuning and so on, please, I know that it's not chargeable, but it's okay. This is only for demonstrating how we can build an access layer based on dedicated, for example, in this case, rules. What I'm doing is I'm using the function is role member, and this gives me the opportunity to check whether a user is member of a dedicated database role. So we have three. Our customer category is exactly named as these roles, and that's what I'm querying. Said, okay, give me only the where the membership is true. Execute. So I tried to execute at the management, and it's working. You see that the management is accessing everything, but that's absolutely okay. The second one is the customer user, and I hope that it's only C customers. It is. Okay, you can't do that if you have hundreds of millions of rows, then I wouldn't recommend to do that this way. What happens if I add the customer to the B customer? Yeah, clear. This is only a DBA task. You get a change request, say put this user to the B customer role. And the moment you add it, now they have access to it. Alan.
I feel sort of, well, of course you can do it this way, but I feel this is kind of redundant. You have the customer categories both in the data and in the roles. So I would just define the table where our customer categories and then have a filtering against that table and just skip the rows that we serve.
Okay, yeah. So Alan said, okay, it's a redundant data. It's absolutely clear, but it's for demonstration. I completely agree to you, but I want to do it in a demonstration how you can separate the data. That's the only reason why I do that in this way. Okay? Yes?
So you said your real system with the membership thing, you have 5 customers using the system.
Yes?
Yeah. And so do you have 5 different versions of every view and procedure with different business rules, or how?
So the question was, I have 5 customers dealing with this kind of development. Yes, they have their own objects, but this is in a customer schema. That means I have basic set of views of stored procedures in my database, which are basic, which can't change. And if there is a special requirement, then yes, I develop that for him. I want to earn some money, yeah? and it's like SAP. Yes, and then you were right. Then I put these special views, dedicated views for the customer in an own schema, where only customer objects are in.
So it's its own schema where the customer is responsible for maintaining the contents of the views.
Yeah, if he could that do, then yes. But basically, we're doing that. So if they give the requirement, they give the request to us, and we do that then for him.
As long as it doesn't change, you said it.
Yeah.
That's fine, but I mean, things change. It's going to make life quite hard for you.
Pardon?
If you add a new column,
Yes.
it will be really hard work to maintain it.
So the question was, if I add a new column, would it hard to be to maintain? That was your question. Yes.
How do you solve it?
Yeah. So and if I will implement, let's say, a new column into the basic application, that means, for example, I would add a new phone number, for example. Then I have really to update everything in my from the pure development range, absolutely. But what I'm doing is I'm scripting it from we have it in Team Foundation server, for example, then we deploy it. Yes, but we have to do that, absolutely. Yeah, and the schema is always expanding, it's always changing. But then in this case, it seems to be more a new release that we say we deploy a new release. But the customer, and this is the one other thing, let's say if you rename one of these objects, that could be sometimes. But when I work with a view, for example, as a layer above the table, then it would be great. The only thing what I have to do is have to go into the view. I have to take into consideration, the name of that attribute has changed, but I put him an alias, what was the former name? And then the application will go on. So there is no need to change in the application the link framework or whatever they have. That's the idea behind. Yeah? Question okay? Answered?
Yeah, I'm very unconvinced about this approach. But
Yes. Okay. Okay. Maybe we can just discuss this after that.
Yeah.
Would be interesting, yeah? Okay. Good. Okay, I drop these objects. Any more questions? Okay. So then what we do is what we'd have seen was the layer 2. That means that we have the preparation of the data from the layer 1, from the tables. Data protection is granted because we have a pre-selection in the view, and we have simplified the complex model under the table. The user doesn't need to know where the customer, where the invoice is, how did they stand in relation to each other. And the basic permission should be select or execute. Start, okay. So, whoa. Sorry, that was, okay. The last is the layer 3, the data manipulation. That means data can only be manipulated by usage of resource access. That means we have only stored procedures. I won't give access to the tables directly. Only with objects like stored procedures we can control that the users will not do or put the data in that they say would be the best. On the other hand, we have the check constraint or the constraints on the table level. So, okay. The idea behind here is the following, and this is what I will demonstrate in my Access application. Let's say we put in data in the customer table, and if the phone number is blank, then there should be created automatically an action item for the business to ask for the phone number, for example. So what I'm doing then is I create a new object called data action items. It's a very simple table. And there's only, in the moment that we add a new customer, they will automatically insert it an action item when not everything is fulfilled. Okay. Good. So we can handle it in different ways. I've decided to put it in a trigger. in this way. Basically, I would prefer to use a store procedure which handles the complete transactions. Say, insert the customer, check whether the phone number has been inserted. If not, put a new record into the action item table. I do it with a trigger. In that case, a very, very simple, and it's this. Oh, sorry. This in trigger here is only for an update, which means that I update the record if there are some changes in it. Sorry, it was a fault from me. This is useless in this case, and here is my stored procedure. So, here it is. This is the stored procedure the user have to use. It's called proc insert customer data in the application schema, which means that this is the schema where the user have execution rights to. And the parameters, very simple: name, city, street, name, street, customer code, zip, city, and phone. And what the system is doing here, within a transaction, we insert the data into the customer table. This is this part. We get the last identity value, and then we check whether the phone number, if it's not entered, then we insert a new record into the data action items table. Opala. Okay, and this one. Yeah, and we get, as return, we get the number of the ID of the new record from the customer. Okay. Good. This second thing, because that's part of the demonstration in effect client, is we need to display the data to the client in the application, and we do that. We put it into a list box. The list box is a control, and that's the reason why we put it into the control schema. And this is a very simple thing. The only thing what I said is, hey, show me every item which is not closed from the action items. A very simple one. But I can't use the direct access to the table because it's not allowed. So that's the reason why I have to use a view or a stored procedure. But a view will not work because the standard user is only allowed to have access by execute, nothing else. That's the reason why I use a stored procedure. So now I tried to do it as the user customer, do it customer user, execute as. And I tried to put in a new record. And what I then tried to do, and this is typical, I saw it in very, very much application, that someone is entering values. They try to catch the identity value back for doing something more of them. For example, in my case, they're trying to access the data.customer table. But I think that you know what will happen. It will fail because there is no select permission. So the data will be inserted. Here is the information, entering the given data into the customer value, and then a new action item has been added to the action list. That was okay because there was no phone number in, but the direct access to the data itself was not allowed. It failed and revert. So let's say the layers are ready, and now we want to use them in our applications. Want to use that in an Access application, for example. So therefore, I start my wonderful, super perfect designed DemoDB. Wow, that's okay. And the first thing, and this is something I want to point to, is I'm currently logged in as the user named customer user. You see it here. And what you see is that these are the objects here, the queries. These are the only objects this user can see. Nothing else. If I change it to integrate it, so okay, now I'm the sysadmin, see what happens. Have a look to the top left corner. You will see here the queries, they will increase, and suddenly I see the tables. That's perfect. That's exactly what I want. I'm the DB owner. I have access to everything. And the moment I change it back, only the objects where the dedicated users access to, that was ABC $123, and save it. Okay. Yes. Oops, and gone. This is a perfect protection. No data can be changed directly. Okay, form input customer data. This is my form I want to use. Come on. The first thing, here is my control. And if you look to the record source, it's my item, my store procedure. The same as you can do it in a .NET environment. Okay, and then go. So here it is. Yeah, no access directly to the table. I have to insert it. Oh, come on. Dika, here. And my no phone number. In the moment I save the record, I get the never, and then the second one. And this is simple code. The only thing what I'm doing is I fire the store procedure, which inserts my data, and then I make a refresh in the control. The code is very simple. Here it is. Okay, it's not sophisticated code, but it's very simple. I create a command object, put the parameters in, fire it, and then I said, okay, here's my return value, which is the new ID. And what I see then is, okay, if the return value is greater 0 or unequal to 0, that means I have a new data, then make a refresh on the item object. That's it. But no access to the tables itself. This was the main goal in this case. Reusability, this is another thing what we want to do. The reusability means that we have multiple applications which are using the same objects. And therefore, I have the last example. Let's see how many time we have. Okay, that's good. I have a last example for it. This is a very common way. So I have in our application, for example, there's a fat client, but the reporting should basically use with reporting services. It was one of the requirements of one server. I think was one of the applications. It's a more modern way to have reports and access, and you can't use it on your mobile, for example. So what I'm doing, I'm creating exactly the same object as before, the view customer revenue, that's the same as I did before, with the classification of the customers. And let's see, here they are. So here's the categorization, then a customer, and we have 55 rows in it. So the next thing what I'm doing, because I want to use it in multiple applications, is I want to get a list of all available applications. The view is only a helper function for me, a helper object for me. The real object, what the user needs to run, is this procedure called available customers list. Have a look to it. Okay, here it is. I check definitely prior, is this user allowed to access the data by checking his role membership. Control E. Okay. And now I create the reporting procedure. This is for my reporting. But if you have a look to it, this code has a leak in it. The reporting.proc blah 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 is using a customer ID, and based on the customer ID, it's running the invoices table, doing some accumulation, doing some queries, and that's it. I run it this way. Done. But have a look to the code, and there is a problem in. How can a user cheat that? When he runs this store procedure, he could put in every customer number. We are not controlling it. It need to be taken into consideration. Yeah? Please make sure that not the user is always selecting because he's a very, very smart guy and is only using your application. Think about what will happen if you're using an Excel sheet, for example, and he adds this procedure as a source for the data. He could put in everything. The problem here is that we can execute the store procedure with every single ID. For example, this is my list. The customer is only allowed to have B and C customers. Okay? But if I run the, come on, here you see 3, 2, 4, and so on, the others are not allowed. But if he wants to see the amount from the A customer, he only puts in this number, and that's it. It will run. So this is a problem with the data. So the correct one needs to be in this way. I have to join it with my view customer revenue, because there are only the data inside which I am allowed to have to access to. This is something which will quite often be forgotten. So if I do it now. Pardon? So the last thing, now we finished. Now we have a customer list. This is for my reporting, and now I play around with that. Come on, here it is. Now we have two programs, two applications where the service can be provided. The first one is that I run it in reporting customer. Sorry, this is not yet. Reporting, here it is. Come on. Okay. I stop. Yeah, it's okay. The problem, this is an access problem. I have created new objects. The application was open. I needed to refresh it. That's the reason why many people are switching to .NET, I think. So, okay, here is my my control that gives me the list of my customers. And the moment I select it, I think it's very, very easy. The second store procedure will be executed. But that's not a highlight. The highlight is, let's say that the users are running a report service, and here I have exactly the same thing. I'm using the same controls as in the application. So if I want to check my report, come on. So here they are, and definitely the same. I'm working with the same customer user. And now let's say there is a new requirement. The requirement is quite simple. You see the list. The list is not ordered. So, and they want to have it in an ordered way. So very, very simple. Normally, we would change it in the Access application, and we should change it in my report service application. I don't have to do so. The only thing that I need to do is I have to change my store procedure. Just a second. Come on. Here it is. Here. And run it again. And the whole application is using the new selection. Go. Here it is. And that makes it a little bit more simple for me, from my point of view, to distribute changes to my applications. I have only two applications. I have my reporting services and I have my Access application. But if you have a large environment where you have more applications running Access or running queries again, the same data, you should think about it. I know that it's not the very perfect thing, but it's an idea how you can protect your data. And this is in many, for example, in enterprise environment, one of the highest requirement that you protect your data. Think about a few of the banks near Frankfurt and north, and more to the south. It could be good if not everybody can see the data, especially if you had some tax problems, for example. So, and these protections can be done by implementing layers in, because this way you can control the access to your data. Have you any questions concerning this? Come on, where are you? Here. Great. Then thank you very, very much for your attention. I hope you enjoyed this session. I really hope that you have some new inspiration, not that you say, oh, everything was okay, but that you had some inspiration how you could ensure or can make sure that your data are protected. Some few words about the PaaS, the things what PaaS has to offer. Take a look to the paas.org website. Maybe you'll find some interesting events where you can participate. Thank you very much for your interest, and Yeah, see you next time.